1, 2 testes. 1, 2 testes. What is up, people? Welcome back to the channel. So we're in today for a push day. I was actually meant to record this last week, but I got a little bit too embarrassed to record it because there's people using the equipment around me. So here I am. Hopefully I'm gonna give less of a shit about what people here are thinking of me. That's actually, it's an interesting book I just finished up, was about having too much of your actions guided by what other people are thinking. And over the course of last year, when I've been recording more of these videos in this type of setting, it has really made me kind of confront that fear that I do have, which I'm sure lots of people do have. You know, you see somebody looking at you when you're like recording a video like this, you do automatically start to think, well, the Irish mentality is like, oh, that person must be so full of themselves, or, you know, look at them showing off. Whereas realistically, in a gym, nobody really gives a shit about what you're doing. People are too focused on what they're doing. People, like, even I've noticed myself in this gym, right? There's lots of people filming for YouTube, big influencers, all that kind of stuff. And you know what? I see somebody recording, I'm like, cool, I wonder who they are. Or like, you know, isn't that cool? And just, that's it. That's the extent of the thought that I have in my mind. It is interesting because I still do get kind of overwhelmed by it, or I do get consumed by it, and then it guides some of my decisions. So trying to stop that. And it's a key part of like doing the YouTube thing, isn't it? Like, you want to be able to record yourself in different environments other than just in your fucking house. But anyway, we're in today to record a push session. I'm starting off with some calves because your calves can never be big enough. Calves could be one of the most depressing muscle groups to train. And I think it's because on most people, there is such a clear difference between where the muscle belly is and the insertion points, right? So what I mean by that is how far down towards the joint that the muscle is inserting, and then the gap between where the tendon is to the muscle belly. On the calves, typically, with a lot of people, it's not necessarily that they have small calves in terms of the actual circumference, it's that the insertion point is so long. So like, if you were to look at me, right, my insertion point probably comes up like about a quarter at least of my shin bone, and then like the rest is my calf muscle. Where like somebody who has like really aesthetically pleasing calves, it can actually go down lower, and then even just the actual architecture of like the muscle itself can be a slightly different shape. Now, somebody who is less blessed in the like both the insertion department as well as like the architecture of the muscle, like no matter how hard they train, like the muscle is like, it's never going to look that great compared to somebody who has like their insertion points going down that little bit lower. And it's just an unfortunate part of like bodybuilding, that like bodybuilding and like muscle development, physique development is like, it like a lot of it is kind of based on genetics, right? Like both your sponsored training, but also just like what your raw materials are starting out with. You could have fantastic genetics for actually building muscle, but then you could have crappy insertion points and kind of weird looking muscle bellies. And that itself is kind of predispose you to not necessarily being greatly suited towards bodybuilding. And if you want to compete competitively, that's obviously going to go work against your favor. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think it's a reason for you not to train or not to kind of seek to maximize your potential in even like the calves department, right? Because, like, you know, if you've ever seen somebody who has like very, very tiny calves and they've got fucking huge quads, like it kind of looks like an ice cream cone gone wrong, right? Where you have like the tiny little base and then you have the huge kind of scoop on top. Or in cruder terms, it's kind of like having like gigantic balls, but you have a tiny little micro penis. So yeah, you need to kind of keep on top of your grab training. So that's why I'm doing it twice per week now. Wednesday and doing it Fridays, and essentially I'm just undulating the rep schemes. But yeah, they are depressing muscle group because for that reason, like probably why so many people don't train them, because they don't grow. They're not going to grow if you don't train them. First up on the upper body is a floor press. I'm going to be doing a floor press with a close grip. The reason we're doing close grip, overload the triceps. Floor press, it is just going to essentially going to limit the range of motion. So I'm not actually going to be utilizing my pecs much. I'm mainly going to be utilizing the triceps. So again, my sticking point in bench press is my triceps. So the aim over the course of the last few blocks and my next block that's coming up is really just more work on overloading that end range where I have my sticking point. So I'm doing an arm wrap. I'm probably going to go up to 230 pounds or 105 kilos and see how many I can get. Last week I got 15. Another reason why I might use a floor press, for example, is if you find it very difficult to get like tight in the bench, using the floor can actually help. Having something as stable, as sturdy as the floor, and with such a wide surface area, can help you kind of feel how tight and rigid your shoulders should be on the bench. Because when we're trying to think about kind of stabilizing ourselves in a bench press, we're trying to essentially wedge ourselves between the bar as well as the bench. And this circumstance, you can use the floor, which is obviously going to be a huge kind of surface area. And no matter how big or small your back is, you're going to be able to stabilize it there. And there's not going to be any kind of rocking forward or backwards. Now, a mistake people make when actually setting up for these is not getting themselves into their arch. So what I'm doing on the floor, we're still trying to recreate as many conditions as we can as when we're doing our usual bench press, right? So I'm going to go through pretty much the exact same wedging sequence as I will for the usual bench press. I'm going to get myself into my hand position, I'm going to grip the bar in a close grip. I'm going to set myself up onto my shoulders and drive myself into the ground using my feet until I have my arch set. Keep my chest up as high as I can to the bar. So my arch is the exact same as I will in the bench press. I do have a slightly different grip here, but I'm going through the whole same kind of wedging sequence, because then it's going to have a better transfer. Because we don't necessarily want to do this like unarched, like a just complete flat back bench press, because it's going to have less of a carryover to our actual competition bench then, okay? So yeah, let's get into it, see how many we get. Right, so set my grip. Drive my feet into the ground, drive my shoulders into the ground. Now, pressing up with the inside of my palms. Right. Oh my God. One of the benefits of recording your lifts is you can count how many reps you did, because I have no idea how many I did there. Anything over 8 and I lose count. That is how retarded I've gotten over the years and how indoctrinated by powerlifting I've become. So yeah, anyway, I've got 3 sets of 10 to 12 off the back of that. So we building that volume and triceps are pumped. Okay, last set. All right, I'm sure this is not an original idea. I haven't seen it anywhere else. So I'm be doing a sprint machine shoulder press next. And one thing that is always such an issue using a sprint machine is making sure this is centered, and so that you're not fucking off massively to one side of the bench or another, right? So what I do, I'm gonna put this down flat, And essentially, I'm just going to let this bar fall onto it, right? It's unloaded. Then from here, essentially, the way I just try to center is see how many hands I can fit in here, right? So on this side here, I can see that there's no space at all on the smooth. This side, there's probably like 2 fingers. So essentially, I'm just going to start moving this around until I kind of get everything to be kind of even. Then after that, it's just kind of making sure that the bench is at a good angle. So you can kind of see now that it's slightly tilted this way. So I think that's about as good as I'm going to get it. So I should be able to see now once I have this set up. If it is, that's even. I think we're in business. Whoa. Nice. Whoa. So with shoulder pressing, it's never been something that I've been extremely consistent with for a few reasons, right? Being a powerlifter, I've always preferred to have more of my pressing volume dictated towards bench press versus an overhead press. Second reason being, even if I do an overhead press or like a dumbbell seated shoulder press, when it comes to dumbbell seated shoulder press, like you just get limited by how much weight you can kick up, and then like it turns into like doing almost like a power clean up to your shoulders, or you're relying on having somebody else there to get the dumbbell in position. Whereas then with the overhead press, you know, it's always a case that I like fail because of like skill and not being great at the movement. And then it comes to like, okay, well, do I really want to be skilled at this movement, or do I just want to get the muscular adaptations? And if it's just like I just want to get the muscular adaptations, because having bigger delts looks good in the physique, but also will translate to probably a bigger bench press because your front delt is very much involved in the bench press. Why not just do it on a machine or a Smith machine? And like, I honestly think the Smith machine is great. Like, it used to be like one of those things where you're like, oh, Smith machine is fucking lame, and Smith machine's for pussies. It's like it's just a piece of equipment, right? And maturing him is kind of realizing that that's all it is. It's going to be a great tool to use for building muscle. So I can push these sets pretty close to failure. I keep pretty much all the stress on the kind of delts and the tries, but I'm not actually kind of locking these out fully because I don't want to fatigue my triceps. I really want to fatigue the delts first. And for that reason, it's a great exercise choice. Now, with the degree of incline, like once you go past the 45-degree incline, you're going to be utilizing more of your delts versus your pecs. I have this set at a 65-degree incline because it just feels the most comfortable for me. When I'm kind of pressing out in this kind of motion, it feels good. Okay, I feel it across my upper chest, feel it across my delts. When I get into this position where I'm like almost like sitting at a 90-degree angle and I'm pushing straight up, like I just get limited by my mobility, and like I don't really have an interest in like getting more mobile in those areas because I don't think it's going to confer me an extra benefit for my bench press. And for that reason, but why force myself to get into this position when I'm rarely ever going to be using it? I can do it without load. I can put my arms straight up overhead without having to compensate by bringing my thoracic spine up, but I have no real need to train there because I'm not going to get more front delts by going into this position. I'm going to get just as much front delts by being in this position where I can control, where I can lift a lot of weight. So there's things that you need to consider when it does come to your overhead pressing. It doesn't need to be directly overhead. Yeah, maybe if you're doing like an overhead press competition, but if you're just looking to build your delts, get it up into the degree of incline where you can maintain this kind of arm position and push a heavy load. Another reason why it's great. You can fail it safely. So onto our next pressing movement. So one on a hack I want to give you here, you've probably seen it before, but you might be new to this. So when we're getting into any of these press machines, we want to be able to have them set so that we're going through a full range of motion, of course, at the shoulder joint, but we don't want it to be going into a range where it's going to be uncomfortable unracking it, okay? If I'm just get this into this setting here, right, and having it at this height, I can adjust it. However, if I adjust it upwards, I'll start to bottom out the machine as it comes down to the bottom, which is going to cut off some range of motion in the stretch. So if I'm just getting into this position here, you can see that my elbow has to go really far behind the body, and to unrack this, it's going to be quite sore for me to actually lift it off, especially as the weight gets up to what I'm working with. So what I do is I get this, show it underneath here, okay? You do this with a D handle, you do it with a plate, anything. So then I'm actually able to get into this a lot easier, and then as I press up, the plate's going to fall off, so that I'm able to get full stretch throughout the entirety of the rep. So it's very easy little hack to do, but it'll save your shoulders, and you're going to be able to press more weight, because if you have a very hard lift off, that's going to cut your rep short, going to cut your volume short, going to cut your gain short. Now, one thing I see people get mixed up with all the time on an incline bench, especially powerlifters, is continuing to do their massive arch when they're doing it. So if we're thinking about like using incline bench in a program or incline press, for a barbell, for a powerlifter, I'd probably use it more so for helping with bar path. But when it does come to actually building muscle, well, it's not just like the incline of the pad here, right? If we are putting ourselves into a position where we're in our massive arch, well, what we're doing then is we're changing the angle of our rib cage, and this is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to artificially change the angle of our rib cage so that our arm path is coming more up across the higher end of our pec, right? So more towards the clavicle, more towards the collarbone. If we go into a massive arch here, what ends up happening, if I get into really high up on my shoulder blades and I'm like this and I have a huge arch here, I essentially end up like making the incline of the bench a moot point, because I've essentially made it so that I'm almost like a flat bench incline here, right? So my chest is almost in the position where if I was lying flat on the bench, I'd probably have the same level of a sternum angle. So you're getting pretty much more of your kind of middle chest fibers hit if you're doing an arch on something like this. So you want to think about keeping your rib cage kind of down versus having a big arch, okay? And focusing on bringing the arm across the upper back. So yeah, if you're doing an incline on a machine, stop fucking arching. It is not your competition bench press. If you look at me when I'm doing these sets, I was actually doing this previously for more of a delt and chest focus, and like the difference between that and a tricep focus is your torso position. So when you have more of a kind of lean forward position, your arm is going to be wrapping around your rib cage that little bit more. Well, it's not just the arm, it's the pec is going to be lengthening more as it comes across the rib cage. Versus when you keep your torso more upright, it's less likely that this is going to happen, right? So if there was any kind of wrapping around to happen at the pec, it's going to be more so like the costal fiber. So the guys here, like really down here, however, by keeping yourself more upright, you're more so focusing on the elbow flexion and elbow extension component of the movement. So pretty much it's just my triceps taking a load here, and the difference is crazy, right? So when I am doing it for more the chest and delts focus, I pretty much do the sack for a few sets of like 10 plus reps. Whereas I do this now just for my triceps, have it down like 3/4 of the way down. So there's quite a strength difference, right? Because you're utilizing less muscle groups. So plenty of pressing in this training session, but I've got one more set here, and then I'm gonna move on to a seated row. Oh, one more set left. There's a lot of volume in this session, and I'm doing a lot of volume in pretty much all of my sessions at the moment. However, I'm recovering from them. That's the main thing, right? And one thing I was definitely changing my mind on since starting to work with John is just how much volume I can handle across all my lifts and across like all the sets I do across the week. I've always been preferred to do higher volume, but just because you do higher volume does not necessarily mean that you can train with still a high level of intensity or high level of training quality. There's been a decent amount of kind of like research coming out over like the last like few years, of course, on like likes of volume, on likes of like training low, training intensity, how close you need to train to failure, and like it does seem that there's a huge kind of like variance in how close you need to actually push to failure to get good results. There's also a huge amount of variance in how many sets that you can actually do and recover from. So there's a study that came out not too long ago, which kind of had participants in the study work up to doing 52 sets per, I think it was a single muscle group over the course of the week. That's a lot of fucking sets, like 52, right? Now, the main thing not to overthink about here is like the actual amount of sets and like, you know, thinking into, you know, the actual specifics of those numbers, right? The main thing I took from the study was we underestimate how much we can actually recover from. And I think this is one thing that people will get into. It's like, they'll be like, oh, you know, I'm maxed out of like my training volume or how much I can handle. And it's not necessarily that they are maxed out from a physiological perspective, but they're more so maxed out from a mental perspective, what they feel they can handle. And ultimately that can limit you to a degree, I guess, because your ability to get stronger, your ability to get bigger is going to be dictated by the amount of stress that you can handle. If you have a very low capacity for handling stress, well, then you're always going to be fighting a kind of uphill battle in regards to kind of building up that level of stress tolerance. And one thing that you definitely could do with doing is trying to build up your tolerance to stress. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you kind of double your training volume next week, but like next block, you know, some things are kind of stalling. As opposed to like it changing your rep range or something like that, why not just like add on another set? Now, if you have a lift that's like stagnating in terms of strength, add on another set, that block, see what happens in regards to strength. The following block, add on another set. And you don't necessarily need to add on till you're getting like 10 sets, but like it works up to somewhere, if you're doing 2 sets at the moment, you could definitely work that exercise up to 4 sets over time. And then, you know, you're handling a higher level of stress in terms of overall volume. Then by the time you drop back down to 2 sets, you probably can end up increasing load quite considerably. And then you can go through the process over and over again when lifts are stagnating. So yeah, you can definitely recover from more than you think you can. And you just have to kind of challenge those biases. Like I've been challenging those biases like the last few months since I started working with John, and yeah, it's obviously paying off. So okay, last set of these. Drop down a load. I'm gonna aim for something that's a high rep range here. 15 on the last one, I think. Maybe about 12. I don't fucking know. All right, wrapping the day up with some delts, because you can never have side delts too big. So I'm using the Atlantis here. Usually use the hammer strength, but it's occupado. Now, one thing that I prefer over hammer strength compared to this one is this, right? So with the hammer strength, you essentially have pads. They're kind of like this one, if you can see this in the shot. But essentially the pad kind of goes up here or in your elbow. So with this kind of holding it in my hand, it does mean that I have to work harder, okay? Because when you think about how your muscles are going to produce force, so we have like the axis, right, which is the joint. So your muscle got to be here, and then where are we holding the weight, right? That's the point of application. So this is between the joint that's working and where the weight is going to be. That's called the lever arm. The longer the lever, the more force it essentially has to produce, okay? But producing more force does not necessarily mean that you are going to get more attention. It just means you essentially have to work harder to move the load. So if I can decrease that lever arm, which I would if I had the hammer strength, which is going to be positioned here, I can essentially allow myself to push harder with a heavier weight and potentially get a little bit more stimulus, because I also then don't have to like worry about kind of stabilizing my elbow joint or stabilizing my wrist joint as well. And it's one of the benefits of actually using cuffs. So you're using like a cable crossover, using cuffs as opposed to the D handles in your hand. This accomplishes that. It's not necessarily that you're trying to reduce grip fatigue. It's just that by making the lever arm shorter, you're able to get a more effective and more potent stimulus. So yeah, well, sometimes machines are busy, but the benefit of training in this gym is probably like the best, most well-equipped gym I've ever trained in. So I'm gonna get into it because Emma is waiting. Drop set. Drop set. Well, you hungry?
Very hungry.
Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully the video was somewhat useful, but we are on our way home to get some food and recover. So yeah, stay large and talk to you next one.